Joey Logano went from being eliminated to standing atop the championship stage. Is he a deserving champion? Was Phoenix a good race on Sunday? And the pace car ran into the pit road entrance barrels. Welcome back to Break Hard. My name is Matt, and I'm sure a lot of people are not happy after Sunday's NASCAR Cup Series race in Phoenix, where Joey Logano won the race and the championship to become a three-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. He went from being eliminated after the Roval to being put back into the championship after Alex Bowman was disqualified a little over 2 hours after that race, to now standing atop the championship stage, hoisting the trophy for the third time in his career with an average finish of 17.1. We'll get to that in a second. But Joey Logano, he picks up the championship win in a season where nobody really anticipated Logano doing it. But it is an even year, and every time he wins the championship, it's an even year. Every time he makes it to the Final Four, it's an even year. Are we going to be back here doing this again in 2026? At this point, yeah, the sample size says that we absolutely are. But for Joey Logano, people are going to say, is he a deserving champion? People are going to question the legitimacy of his championship. They're going to question the validity of it and whether or not he should actually be the champion. So here's something I think we need to clear up right off the bat. A ton of people are going to say that the only reason he won the championship is because the 48 got knocked out and got disqualified. That's not Joey Logano's fault. A lot of people are like seemingly blaming Logano for getting back into the championship for the 48 car being underweight. The 22 team and Roger Penske and Joey Logano, Paul Wolfe, they had nothing to do with Blake Harris, Alex Bowman, and Hendrick Motorsports and that car being underweight. They just happened to be the beneficiary of, being the next car in line. They were ninth in points. Bowman gets disqualified and loses all of his points. Then the ninth car just moves up. It could have been Logano. It could have been whoever else in that position. It just happened to be Joey Logano, and people are not happy about it. And I understand it, right? Logano is a polarizing character. People love him. They hate him. They want to mock his hair, which I don't understand that aspect of it at all. They hate the way that he races on the racetrack. Yeah, I can see both sides of why you like him, why you don't like him. He's clutch. He gets wins when he needs to get wins, and he capitalizes on his opportunities when he can. So if you're a fan of him, completely understand that. If you don't like him, I completely understand that too, because when he puts a helmet on, as he said before, he's a dick. He's an asshole. Like, he's that type of guy when he puts the helmet on. Then when he takes the helmet off, you're like, oh, this is actually not that bad of a guy. Puts the helmet on, and you're like, okay, Two-Face, like, what happened here? Then we're going to have to go find Batman now. So for Logano, yeah, I understand why people aren't going to be happy about this. But when it comes down to it, the 22 team did exactly what they need to do in these playoffs. When they were given that lifeline, they got back into the playoffs, and guess what? They went out and won in Las Vegas. Yeah, that's massive for them. They win in Las Vegas, and that puts them into the championship race. Okay, great. Earlier in the playoffs, they win in Atlanta, so they advance on right there. They win when it matters, and then they go to the championship race in Phoenix, and they won there. A lot of people are going to point to the fact that he has the worst average finish ever amongst NASCAR Cup Series champions. And there's no disputing that. He does. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. Yeah, I agree with you. A 17.1 average finish is terrible. It should probably be back about 19th in points. I mean, guys like Bubba Wallace, Ty Gibbs, Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, all had better average finishes. I mean, Bubba's average finish was like 2 spots better than what Logano's was this year. But Logano and his team won when it mattered. They won once in the regular season, and then on a fuel gamble at Nashville when other people could have done the same thing. Imagine if Zane Smith wins at Nashville. We're not talking about Joey Logano right now, which is the craziest thing of all of this. Then he goes in and wins in Atlanta. Then he goes and wins at Las Vegas on a fuel mileage run where anybody else could have done the same thing that they did. And then he wins at Phoenix because he just has a badass fast race car. Led 107 of the 312 laps. Not the most on the day. That belongs to Christopher Bell, who probably thinks he should have been here as well. So when it comes down to it, the 22 team and Team Penske overall, they figured out how to win in this format. Winning and being super successful in the regular season literally does not matter. Yeah, it can carry you through the playoffs, but when it gets down to it, winning once in the regular season and then capitalizing on literally like 3 races in the playoffs is kind of how you should run your championship. And that's what Logano did. I mean, that's how he survived. He won in Atlanta. He wins in Las Vegas. He gets that lifeline. And without that lifeline, of course, they're eliminated from the playoffs. But again, that's out of their control. So I understand why people are going to be upset about this. I understand why they're not going to be happy about it. But in reality, they just played to the format and they played to the strengths of what that format rewards. And that's winning at select times. That's what they did. They went out there and won when they needed to and put them into the championship race. Not really their fault. There's 7 other guys in that round of 8 that could have done the same thing that they did. I mean, heck, Tyler Reddick and Ryan Blaney did the same thing. They weren't able to capitalize on Sunday. So for Logano, yeah, it's going to be controversial. Yeah, people are going to be upset about it. But when you look at it, his numbers don't matter because that's not what this format's about. This format's about surviving the elimination. It's about these 3 race little championships to get to that final race. And that's where they were most successful at. That's where they were clutch at. That's where they capitalized. That's how they end up winning a championship. Is it the best way to determine a champion? Who knows? You could throw it up in the air and decide that. The problem here is, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is a lot of NASCAR fans seemingly don't like this championship format. And it's because it was introduced when they already knew a different type of championship format existed. If they've always been doing the playoff format in NASCAR since 1972 in the modern era, nobody would care. They'd be like, yeah, this is how you determine a champion, because they don't know any different. It'd be like if the NFL just had a full regular season and they didn't have a Super Bowl at the end. And then all of a sudden they introduce a Super Bowl and people are like, well, what the heck? The best team's not going to win at the end of the year. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how all playoff systems work. Imagine if the Premier League all of a sudden was like, hey, we're going to, take the top 16 teams in the table, and then you're going to play for, the Premier League title at the end of the year. And maybe the best team's not going to win. Maybe Manchester City's not going to win, or whoever, I don't know, Arsenal isn't going to win the title. Things like that happen all the time in American sports. Is it the best way to determine a champion? I don't know. It's up for debate. Is it an entertaining way to determine a champion? Yeah, absolutely entertaining. And sports are entertainment at the end of the day. And Logano capitalized on it. I know people aren't going to like it, but he played to the strengths of the format. And now he is the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion. Let's talk about, was it a good race though? Because this race, top to bottom, not a good race. It's probably about a 52. It wasn't very entertaining at all. The race started off, and it's Phoenix, right? The Xfinity Series race at Phoenix on Saturday night, actually good. Truck Series race, not as bad as the Cup race, not as good as the Xfinity race. The most intriguing part of the Cup race was the final run of the race when we were wondering if Ryan Blaney could chase down Joey Logano like he chased down Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson last week in Martinsville, and ultimately he couldn't end up doing that. Joey Logano mirror drove, blocked the crap out of him. Him and his spotter Coleman Presley called this race like a super speedway, and they arrow blocked anywhere Ryan Blaney went. Which definitely tells me like Joey Logano was the type of guy that would look over at the multiplayer screen when playing like Halo or NASCAR Thunder or literally anything to see what his competitor was doing and then mirror off of that. 100% would have done that. But for Logano, he went out there and did exactly what he needed to do. Ryan Blaney tried to chase him down. William Byron was kind of just the third best car all day. Could never get up there and contend with the Penske cars. Rudy Fugle, I'm wondering maybe if that race goes green till the end there and doesn't have the caution on lap 251 when Zane Smith spun out because the rotor blew. I'm wondering if it goes green from there, if the 24 maybe has a bit more of a fighting chance. They ran about 8 laps longer than the 12 and the 22 on that tire cycle, so he would have had a little bit fresher tires, but ultimately I just think that 12 car and the 22 car were just too strong on long runs there, and it was always going to come down between the two of them. Ryan Blaney had an opportunity with about 6 laps to go. He got right up to the bumper of the 22. Maybe he could have dove it in there into 3. Maybe he could have put a bumper to it. Ultimately, he didn't because it's his teammate more than likely, and that's probably what ended up costing him the championship. The start of the race, though, number 2, Ty Gibbs taps the wall on lap 1 coming off of turn 4, goes down in the dogleg, and that thing, I don't know if it broke a toe link or what, sent him back towards the outside wall. It could have been a really, really bad crash. It ended up just being a really bad crash. Knocked the crap out of him. It was a hard hit for Ty. He got out of the car and was kind of just not entirely sure on exactly what happened by the sounds of it. And then ultimately his race was done after literally 1 lap on green. And so now he's got to go through the entire offseason being like, well, that sucked. Also just, I feel bad for the guy anytime he goes back to Phoenix because he's always going to be reminded of what happened in Phoenix after his Xfinity Series championship. So I know people don't like Ty Gibbs, but every time we go back to Phoenix, that's the first thing I think about. Same thing like with Martinsville and Hendrick Motorsports or Kyle Petty going up to Loudon and stuff like that. I'm sure it's just brutal and emotional and just brings back a ton of bad memories for him. Stage number 1 was won by Joey Logano. Stage number 2 by Ryan Blaney. Those guys just dominated the day. For the most part, we, TV-wise, focused entirely on the Championship 4, which was to be expected. Tyler Reddick was a non-factor most of the day, ends up coming home with a P6 finish. Solid run for him. Bubba Wallace, P7. So great run for Bubba Wallace as well. The quietest top 10 he's had of the entire year. Daniel Suarez clicked off another top 10. But I think one of the weirder parts coming out of the championship race is the fact that the pace car ran into the sand barrels at pit entrance, like it's Kyle Larson at Homestead last year, or Matt Kenseth trying to get into or onto pit road. It was one of the more bizarre things we've ever seen. It's like the pace car just decided to go all Family Guy. Oh, I turn left now, and just turned, except they were way too late to make it onto pit road there. Clearly a commitment line violation, as everybody on Twitter noted. That was the low-hanging fruit joke. And man, did everybody take that and turn it for a home run. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there. I would love to know what happened, because it just seemed like he forgot that he was on the racetrack and forgot that pit entrance was off of turn 2 rather than down towards the start-finish line. And he just turns left and then runs right into the sand barrels there. People thought that Chase Elliott turned him, which would have been absolutely hilarious, and it would have warranted Chase Elliott winning the most popular driver. That didn't happen. Instead, that is what occurred. He just turned in too late and drove right into the sand barrels. They had to bring out the backup pace car, which we have seen happen before. I think it caught on fire at Martinsville last year, maybe. They bring out the backup pace car. The guy gets out, swaps into it. Maybe he shouldn't be driving it, but I'm sure it was a mistake. I would love to know how anything like that happens. But yeah, one of the weirder moments that we'll see in NASCAR. And you just, as soon as it happens, you're like, yeah, this probably only happens in NASCAR. Bernd Mailander in Formula One is not driving the medical car off into anywhere, or the safety car off into anything. So just one of those bizarre moments that will probably get chalked up and shown on replay for quite some time. So at the end of the day, Joey Logano is your 2024 NASCAR Cup Series champion. Ford now has won the last 3 Cup Series championships. Penske's won the last 3 as well. And they've laid out the blueprint now for all the other teams to be like, hey, you don't have to be good like Kyle Larson was in the regular season. You don't have to go out there and dominate. All you have to do is win once and then just kind of sit around and mess off like you're a senior in high school until you get to the playoffs, and then things actually matter, and then you should start trying to, click off wins. I see a lot of people comparing what Jimmy Johnson used to do in the chase to what Joey Logano does, and to an extent they're right, but what's different about Jimmy is when he won outside of 2016, his wins in the regular season didn't lock him into the championship. There was still an outside chance that he could have missed. But then when he got into the chase, as it was back then, it was 10 races. And whoever had the most points at the end of those 10 races wins the title. In this situation, Joey Logano didn't have to care about points. Joey Logano knows if I win in Atlanta, I'm into the next round. Then he obviously needed to point his way through that round of 12. Doesn't do it, but then gets in because of Bowman, and then knows that the best way to get to Phoenix is to win. They threw a Hail Mary in Las Vegas, won, and that's what happens. It's different. It's not the same way that we've always determined a champion. I get it, but it's been this way for the last 10 years, and nothing's going to change. They're not changing the playoff format for next year. It's just a different style format and a different way to determine a champion. And I don't know. When you look back on history, is anybody going to be like, hey, he's not a deserving champion that year? The rule book or the record book's not going to say, hey, he only had a 17.1 average finish. And I don't think people are going to care down the road, because the record book is always going to say that Joey Logano, as of now, is a 3-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. So I'm interested to hear everybody's thoughts on this. I know it's going to be controversial. But yeah, I think it's worth having the public discourse around this entire way to determine a champion. So let me know your thoughts on the championship, the pace car running into the pit road entrance barrels, as well as whether or not you thought this was a good race. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.